The news making headlines. South Sudan Court of Appeal has ordered the retrial of 16 people convicted for alleged involvement in corruption in Juba. Now, among these four are four Kenyans: Boniface Chuma, Ravi Chagda, Anthony Kea, and Anthony Mwadime. They were working in the country when they were arrested and charged with various offenses relating to financial misappropriation and given 72-year jail sentences. Their relatives have been complaining that Kenyan government has not intervened to secure their release. Foreign Affairs CS Amina Mohammed refuted claims that the government had abandoned the four Kenyans. In an 80-page ruling, the South Sudan court further directed that the accused remnant of Juba Central Prison during the retrial. The accused were arrested by the General Intelligence and Bureau of different dates. Joining me in the studio to have that conversation is Sandra Oyombe, who's a program advisor, Legal Affairs, Kenya Human Rights Commission. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having
Now,
me.
given this ruling and this development, what does that mean for the Kenyans who are in South Sudan?
This is actually a very important time for the Kenyans who have been imprisoned in South Sudan. It means that it's an opportunity for them to be brought before court so that they can be able to have a fair trial, and that their case will be heard, and we believe by an independent and impartial court.
Okay. Now, their relatives had complained that the Kenyan government had abandoned them and left them. What's the usual procedure when you're arrested, or when in terms of human rights, when you're arrested in a foreign country? What's the procedure to follow?
The procedure for arrest and detention of people is well articulated in international covenant, in the international treaties that most of the countries have signed, and more specifically Kenya. And South Sudan has signed and was to ratify the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and it stipulates the principles that enshrine a fair trial, which include that when a person is arrested, such a person should be informed in a language that that person understands, the reason as to why he or she has been arrested. And if they have been arrested, then they should be brought before an independent and impartial court within reasonable time. The question then that the court should address, if we are to take the four Kenyans back to, or the 16 people in South Sudan back for retrial, is whether procedure has been followed in terms of bringing the accused persons to court on time. That should be one of the questions we believe the Court of South Sudan should be able to address. The second thing would be that if they are brought to court, then they should be explained for the charges they are facing and the particulars of those charges in a language that they understand. Our Kenyans who are in South Sudan do not understand the Sudanese language. And therefore, if they are to be asked in court, they should be given the opportunity to address the court and say the language they are most comfortable with in understanding, and therefore, any particulars read to them should be read in that language that they are capable of understanding and responding to. Yes.
Now, is it unusual for somebody to expect that if you're in a foreign country, then the least they could do is bring you back home and have the trial at home, you know, for fear of the other country not being fair?
There is a possibility of people being brought back to their country and having a trial conducted in their country if they are not comfortable, or of another foreign country, but that is subject to certain executive prerogatives, and that is upon the President of Kenya and the President of South Sudan, if they have signed some diplomatic treaties or bilateral agreements that are able to enable persons who are of Kenyan or nationality who are in a foreign state to be brought back to Kenya. So that's a prerogative of the executive, and I'm not aware of
any such arrangements so far.
Yes.
All right, so for the Kenyans now who we've just talked about here, what should their relatives expect? What's the way forward?
The way forward, and I would address this question looking at international principles that have otherwise formed customary norms and practices in the world, across the world, whether a country is in security instability, political instability. Fundamental rights are individual fundamental human rights are rights that one cannot derogate from. And in the event that a country is seen to be derogating from such rights, then the question would be the mechanisms that would be used to ensure that the human rights of citizens in a particular country, whether they are foreigners or they are citizens of that country, are protected. The questions then that would be important is for the government of South Sudan to ensure, because a government is mandated in the various international covenants and treaties that have been signed to ensure and to protect fundamental human rights. That's a negative obligation to all states. When most of the states were ratifying the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, there was a negative obligation on state parties to ensure that they respect and protect human rights. Right. And one of the critical rights was the freedom of liberty and security of persons, such that there should be parameters and certain clearly laid out procedures in various legislations to ensure that when you limit somebody's liberty and security of persons, then it should be something that has been either ordered by court or there is a certain threat to the security of the nation. And there are certain parameters that before arresting a person, you inform them of the charge, and the charge should be that charge that is stipulated in law, right. And you afford them a fair trial in an independent and impartial court.
Well, all right, thank you very much, Sandra Oyombe there, the Program Advisor for Legal Affairs, Kenya Human Rights Commission, basically updating us on the way forward for those 4 Kenyans who